session, and I call to order the meeting of December 9th, 2020. I'd like to, I see that Zach Neal is on, and Zach is the water guru for Carroll County. What is your official title, Zach?
I am the hydrogeologist for Carroll County Land and Resource Management.
Okay, so we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I'd like to start the meeting by review of the minutes from the November 4th, 2020 meeting. And I hope everybody's had a chance to take a look at them. Any comments, edits, suggestions? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Seconded.
Who is that second?
Ron Uncles.
All right, Ron. Okay. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Going to old business, wastewater treatment plant. And I sent out the flow, and you'll notice that our flow in the wastewater treatment plant continues to be down and good. I'd also point out that from the map I sent to you, that the rainfall in the area is about normal for Mount Airy for the month of November. It's also similar to what we see in the month of October for Mount Airy. And Zach, I know that you go a little bit north of here and there's been some drought conditions. But what's interesting about that map is that if you look at the eastern shore, at least where they're getting anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 more inches of rain than is normal in the area. So most of these storms that have come through to replenish the aquifer have really just gone through straight across the eastern shore in Anne Arundel County and on down through DC. So I intend to get this precipitation map for the 12 months of 2020, just to let you know, and I think you're going to be surprised at just how much rain has fallen above the average versus our area in the southwest corner of Carroll County. So any comments on that?
No.
By the way, Zach, I could send you the two schedule I'm talking about if you're interested. Okay, I will send that to you. And as far as East-West Pond, Twin Ridge, Harrison, Lashir, east of the Twin Ridge, the town council approved the contract for tree planting in the spring, and that should pretty much wrap up that part of our stormwater management projects. And then, of course, we've got the stormwater management pond project over in East West Park, which is coming up sometime in 2021. Larry, you have any updates you want to pass on to us about Harrison Lashir?
Well, the only updates, if you weren't tuned into the council meeting, is we went through the sequence of events that will occur to see if Harrison Lashir, if the annexation is going to occur. So in January, what we'll be doing is passing the annexation plan or rejecting it. The annexation plan mirrors the annexation agreement and the water sharing agreement. And it's a requirement that goes to the state and the county planning departments and gets reviewed by them. The state only requires 30 days. The county requires 30 days, but then asks for an extra 30 days to get it done. So from January, if this passes, which I think it will, then we would be 2 months out from having a public hearing, which puts it in the middle of March for the public hearing, and then the potential vote on the annexation resolution, that is the official document that says the council has approved the annexation, would occur in April unless it gets pushed off to May because of some problem with the public hearing or something comes up that causes us to delay. So the earliest we would be voting on the annexation resolution would be April and possibly May. So that's the update on all the timeframes involved. And I haven't heard anything about the MDE and the allocation of water at this point that will be made available to us, to the IDA, I should say.
Okay, any questions, comments? I just have one. I don't believe that anybody has submitted information and to the state asking for an allocation of water for Harrison LaShire properties. I'm not up to date on that, but there has to be a whole submission and review process, and then for MD makes a decision. So I don't even know if it's been submitted.
I thought it had been submitted and we're waiting for the answer, is my understanding.
Okay.
Could be wrong. I can talk to Barney and verify it, and I'm not sure if it's us that sent that in, or I would think it would be the IDA that sent that.
I would think it'd
Or
be
maybe it was
IDA.
a joint.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have any standing in terms of sending that in because we haven't annexed the property, we don't own the property, so I'm assuming EA, but so I said, I just don't know what's the state we're in. All right, thank you. All right, let's get down to the meat here. John, you had sent out something today, and that's an update from what we had last month. And if you want to go through that and talk about it, then we can kind of see where we're at and hopefully get close to actually submitting this to the mayor and town council for their approval.
Yeah, sounds good. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, let me know if you have any issues with the sound. I'm going to turn my video off. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me know once you guys can see it.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So, so this is the memorandum that we've talked about, I think for several months now, for sure. I think everyone here on this call has reviewed it. I've been working with Zachary Neal with Carroll County through the process. We've had a handful of discussions. Zachary's been extremely helpful. He fairly recently reviewed the memo. We had asked them to help us come up with some calculated values to help us make our trigger values a little bit more quantitative. And so he was working on that. He and his colleagues at Carroll County also reviewed our draft document and provided a lot of really good feedback. And so I made a few changes. My plan is to kind of highlight a few of those this evening, answer some questions that you guys have, take advantage of Zachary being here to explain some things and to answer any questions that folks have. And then circulate, after this, I'll clean up the document a little bit, remove some of the comments, remove some of the red line strikeout, and then circulate it to everyone for another review. And I really think we're getting really close here. So yeah, finally winding down on this task. All right. I've mentioned in past calls kind of what the county does, which Zachary, what his role is there. I was going to just remind everyone of what my understanding was, and actually ask Zachary to kind of relay to you guys just directly sort of what service he and the county provide, because it's great. It's a great resource to us moving forward, and I think we're really fortunate to be in a county that has the resources and prioritizes this focus on our water resources in the county. So what I brought up on the screen here is a slide that we've looked at in the past. It shows a network of observation wells in Carroll County with a few bullet points from my prior discussions with Zachary. But Zach, would you take a couple minutes just to kind of introduce yourself in a little bit more detail and sort of what you do, what the county does, and how that can or does and can help us here in town with our objectives?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Zachary Neal. I'm with the Carroll County Department of Land and Resource Management. I am the only well, I shouldn't say the only county hydrogeologist. Tom also is, but he's our department director. I have a lot of functions that's generally related to groundwater supply development, protection, and management. But one of the things I do, as John has outlined here, is I go through our 50 monitoring wells throughout the county. We actually have more than that. These are just the ones I visit manually on a biweekly basis. We track water levels in pretty much real time, and we put out notifications when we start to see abnormalities developing across the county for the municipalities to use. So part of it's more, it really depends on the well. A couple of these we use more for background for some of the quarry operations, but generally the ones you're looking at on the screen right now are the ones that we have tied into the municipalities more for drought monitoring and management. So as part of the Water Resource Coordination Council, one of the things I'll do is keep a close eye on these. About once a month, I'll run them through and compare them to other months. Like as an example, I'll go out this Friday, 50 wells, and at some point this month, I will compare that to all the Decembers that we have on record and see how we're looking throughout the county. Generally, what we've been seeing with this approach this year, as Dick was saying earlier, is, you know, a drier northern part of the county up near Manchester, Tawnytown, places in like the Big Pipe Creek watershed. Mostly southern portion of the county's been pretty good though. But like I said, that's the main ones that relates to you guys. So.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna move this out of the way, flip back over to this this document here. I'm looking at it in, let's see, let me bring up the markup here. All right, so I mentioned that Zach had reviewed this. His comments are over here on the right. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I thought I'd highlight a few changes that we've made. I'm also going to take about a minute and a half to kind of explain what we're, like we review this at every meeting, but I think it's probably helpful for crowds and crowds of people who are watching us on Facebook or since we're so popular here, the Water Sewer Commission. But so this memorandum is intended to take the water use restrictions that were drafted a number of years ago, I think 2007. Those were put in place after some dry periods, drought back in 2002, and I think a potential drought in or about 2007. And so the town realized that they needed to pull some guidance together to help define if and when they need to take any kind of restrictions. So we looked at that fairly recently, thought it was pretty complicated, a bunch of different tiers. And so our was to put down into fewer tiers, make it a little bit more straightforward, and then even better, try to quantify some of the inputs that go into the decision-making process. So, oh, sorry, I moved that over to the wrong screen so I could look at the camera while talking. I'll move it back over here. But so what we've done here is pull together this document, which does provide a number of tools that the town can use as a reference. So as I've scrolled down here, we've got in this section for assessing drought, we list actually 5 different tools, we're calling them. These are references that town officials, Water Sewer Commission, anyone can link to, open up, and use as a guide to generally understand trends. You know, what's happening with precipitation. Are there any red flags, with regard to potential droughts on the horizon? As Zach and I have talked about, droughts don't just sneak up on us. Usually, there's indicators. It's a process. There's plenty of evidence in advance of a drought. It doesn't happen overnight. So these tools, none of these will we use specifically to decide whether or not we need to take action. But this is a set of tools that we've sort of documented here in the guidance document to provide that reference for ourselves or for any future commission volunteers or town council members or whoever else. We've looked at most of these in the past, so I don't want to dig into those too much right now. We've made a few tweaks to the language to address some of the comments from Zach and Tom Doublebus at the county as well. So unless there's questions, if anyone has questions, interrupt, we can dig into any of these. I can show you them. Some of them are, one of them, for instance, is this figure here that we look at pretty much every month. This would be one tool, right? No decisions would be made specifically based on this figure, but it would be a thing for us to look at on a regular basis because it would give us, a month out indicator, at least if things are turning in the wrong direction, so that we can begin to consider that and be sure we're ready for further discussion, further communication with stakeholders, and eventually recommendations if we ever thought that restrictions were needed. All right, so those are the tools that we have at our fingertips. I will highlight this one here. Number 2 is a crucial one because this is what Zach was just talking about, the Carroll County resource here. They have this, if I were to click on this link, it actually brings up this very map that we were looking at. So this is a GIS map that the county has. You can click on the wells. You can actually see a hydrograph of the water level measurements that are being collected on a manual basis. So again, it's a tool that town folks can use just to keep an eye on things and to make sure that we're being responsible and tracking drought.
If I could interrupt, John,
Yeah.
that's if you click on that and you bring up the Mount Airy well, that's the same chart, which is like 20 years worth of a history that has been passed out to the Water and Sewer Commission on a semi-regular basis. So you should be familiar with that.
Yeah, that's right. So here, I'll just do it real time here. So clicking on the well in Watkins Park, click on this More Info button, and it brings up an error message.
An error.
Do it again. All right, here it is.
There it is.
So yeah, so this is dating back to 2002. And yeah, this gives us down here, this is monthly precipitation, which is a great resource, right? We can see the roller coaster precipitation amounts on an annual basis and this long-term trend. You can see the really dry 2018 years here. And then this blue line is the water levels within this specific well that county officials, and Zach, I'm not sure when you started, but have been collecting on a regular basis. So yeah, so this is great. Hey, Zach, while we're looking at this, can you highlight just the periods of a particular drought or concern that might be reflected a little bit on this figure?
Yeah, sure. There's 4 that come to mind. I'd say only 2 of them were more on the severe side. The 2001 to 2002 drought is probably the one that most people are familiar with. It was our last great kind of long-term severe drought that we had. And what had happened there, I want to say that one started in the summer to fall of 2001, and we just never got a really good recharge event like we normally do over the winter months. And we went into 2002 then in a lower water level state. So what you're seeing there is the tail end of the 2002 drought. We also had a short-term drought develop late in 2007. That was mostly a kind of summer to fall, maybe early winter drought. And we've only had 2 sort of moderate droughts in recent years, but these are very different. These aren't like peak summer droughts. These are going to be the winters of 2017 into 2018. And actually, I think the other one was 2016 into, yep, there you go, 2016 and 2017, 2017 into 2018. Those were periods where we just didn't get a lot of rain over our fall and winter months, and it left us in a lower kind of storage state going into the next spring. We didn't see the recharge that we usually see over the winter.
Okay, so yeah, so I think this is really helpful. So we've looked at this chart, and the thought was, well, a 20-year record, we could use this to help us figure out what I would call, I don't know, trigger levels perhaps. And so Zach, we'll talk about that in a minute, but you can see, those droughts all are clearly reflected, I think, within the water levels in this particular well. So Zach helped us identify wells in Mount Airy that have an appropriate record of like a historical record. And we've narrowed it down to, I think, 3 wells, right? So we have the Watkins well, and then I think it's these 2 Sunnyside wells. Is that right, Zach?
Shady Side wells, yep.
Shady Side, right. So we have 3 wells within the Mount Airy area that have this long historical record, and we think are going to be good monitoring points that just to use as a point of reference. So just wanted to highlight that. That's this key resource up here. Also,
I want to, while we've got Zach there, I noticed that some of the other wells throughout the county, that blue line that goes straight across, I guess that's the average or mean, and then there's standard deviations off that. I noticed that some of the other ones have a trend that appears to be from left to right going down, meaning that the overall level of water in the well is being reduced to some extent, maybe because it's being used to provide municipalities with water. And this line is very flat. And just your comment, does that mean we're in pretty good shape relative to maybe some of the other municipalities in the county?
So it's actually a tricky question to answer, but I can speak to it more generally. Some of the wells that you've seen, it depends on what their usage was and what was online or offline at times. These wells, I mean, the Watkins Park well in particular does have a nearby production well, but I don't think it has much of an influence on the monitoring well itself. The Shady Side wells are pretty much out there away from any pumping center, but to the point you were making, yeah, some of those other wells, I can think of a couple and say like Hampstead, maybe a few over near Westminster, things like that. They're not far from some of their pumping centers, and you absolutely could start to see a bit of an effect in that regard.
it also might, the actual record, the period of record factor into that a little bit, I would think. If it was a well with a newer period of record, maybe it just hasn't kind of reached a steady state, so to speak. So.
And that's another very good point. Some of these wells have come online in 2000. Some of these actually go back as far as 1990.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the longer the period of record, I would think, you've got more ups and downs and obviously a better average. So. Okay. Alrighty. So back over to this. So we go through the tools, we establish those. I want to mention that this is an important one too, input and recommendations from the Town of Mount Airy Water Department, which is crucial, right? It's hard to imagine that the town would make any decisions with regard to potential use restrictions without input from DPW and the folks over in the Water Department. So can't stress that enough. And then the Water and Sewer Commission, presumably we fill a role here, which I think are, these meetings where we do tend to go through some of these indicators on a regular basis. Dick, right? We're always reviewing this information, and I think that's an important service that we provide here. So I've captured that in this paragraph as well. A couple edits here, just stressing that I think Carroll County had a question as to who's doing what here and what their responsibility might be. I think the monitoring is, it's our responsibility here in the town. And then of course, on behalf of the town, I think the Water and Sewer Commission fills a primary role there. And of course, with support from the DPW as necessary. Presumably we do this assessment on a monthly basis, right? At these monthly meetings. As we talked about, droughts don't suddenly appear. So we're checking these indicators. If there is a need for more frequent discussion, right? We're well prepared to move in that direction. If there's a bunch of red flags everywhere, then yeah, we can increase communication as necessary. That of course would include, as this sentence says, maybe we're looking at some of the tools more frequently, and certainly reaching out to, whether it's folks over in the Water Department, Zach and his colleagues at Carroll County, but increasing the level of communication to make sure that they're able to make appropriate decisions. All right, so a few other tweaks here we've made to address county comments. Oh yeah, so I wanted to highlight this sentence here. So this is a yellow voluntary restriction. So just as a reminder, our plan has normal conditions in stage 1. Stage 2 would be voluntary restrictions. We'll talk in a minute about the things that can trigger that. And then stage 3 would be item 4. So let me say here, these are voluntary water use restrictions should or doesn't. You know, we could consider whether or not that's relevant. County, I don't think.
I could comment on that,
Yeah, please
John. You know, that's really use that really doesn't have anything to do with weather conditions and whatnot. The example is that a number of years ago, we did have concern, and I think it was like the 2007, 2008 period when we had a mini drought, that the issue came up about, you know, car washes put on by nonprofit organizations to raise money, and they would run significant amounts of water in some people's minds. So the issue was, should that be shown as a prohibited activity during a drought situation? The answer was yes, if we were to do that. So I think adding something along the lines of business and residential is a good idea.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good point. And it actually leads to another question. Maybe I'll just address it now since you mentioned car washes. For these restrictions, one thing that I don't think is super clear in this document yet is whether or not it applies to just residents in town or if it applies also to businesses. I think we have one car wash within the town limits that's on municipal water.
Well, we do have a car wash, which by the way has a, I understanding is very good recycling system so that they use minimum.
Yeah.
But yes, it should be clear it applies to all water users. And most of the time when you do a car wash, a particular business provides the water at no cost. So, you know, I think it needs to be addressed. I'm glad you put it in there.
Okay. So yeah, I think we'll probably need to just mention that in here that this would apply to all water users. It may be captured in one way or another, but I'll have to read through that and make sure. So I'll review that and add something in before I circulate it.
Mhm.
Okay. So we listed out some factors here. We'll go through those here in a little bit of detail. I wanted to highlight this sentence here, I put in blue so I wouldn't skip over it. So the point of having these factors, these are triggers, but it's not a situation where, say, one of these factors is triggered and we automatically go to water use restrictions. These, again, are triggers that lead us to pay more attention, have the discussion amongst this group with DPW, with Carroll County, and then feed that through town council for recommendations, right? So nothing is so set in stone that we don't have the flexibility to use best professional judgment in the decisions and recommendations for water use restrictions. All right. So these have been in the document for quite some time. These are referring back to those tools that I mentioned earlier. So for instance, this number 1 here, Maryland Department of the Environment has a statewide monitoring system. Their system isn't specific to Mount Airy. It is, they divvy the state up into multiple regions. In each of those regions, they have a limited network. It may be wells, it may be stream gauges. Not sure if there's reservoirs, there may be reservoirs there as well. And they look at that limited set of information in 3, I think Zach said even up to 12-month period. So over a longer time period, and then they categorize it, red, yellow, green, I think. And so from our perspective, that would just be one tool, right? One thing for us to look at as needed to see trends over time and see what direction they're going in. Not that we're necessarily going to make a decision specifically on that, but it gives us a, you know, an early heads up, so to speak. This one here is the map that I brought over a little bit ago. I'll just flash it up here again, just so everybody knows which one it is. This color-coded map, where if I zoom in a little bit, the color coding here is showing departures from average. So this is just over a 30-day period. So this is a very quick snapshot of what's happened in the recent past. But yeah, you know, as we start to see more reds and yellows, then again, that's a flag. That's something for the Water Sewer Commission to be aware of and to potentially start paying a little bit more attention to. What we've put in our little document here, this says for rainfall, departure from average is 26 to 75% from the 30-day average there. So that's corresponding to one of these colors over here. I think it's this one here to that one, right? So I think we're getting into the yellows and reds. When we get down to the mandatory restrictions, we would be looking at the much greater sort of worst case scenario there. But so that's how a tool like that would be used, as just a reference by us. All right, so this is sort of the new information here as we start to look at these wells. So we mentioned the 3 wells. There's the Watkins Park well, which is right in the middle of the town, right in Watkins Park, and then these 2 Shadyside wells. Of all 3 of these wells are considered appropriate because they have a long period of record, and they seem to be tied into the water level, and for other reasons that Zach could elaborate on. We think they're good for this purpose. Now, we have all that data, and what do we do with it? Well, through a statistical evaluation, Zachary's calculated different percentiles that we can use as a point of reference. So the thought here is that for potentially triggering and implementing voluntary restrictions, we would use a 15% or 15th percentile water level, and we'll look at that here in a minute, how that's calculated. For comparison, if we scroll down to the mandatory restrictions, we'd be looking at a lower level down at the 5th percentile. So 2 different levels. The higher one, 15th percentile, would possibly trigger voluntary actions. The lower one is getting more concerning. It would be 5th percentile, and it would trigger potential mandatory actions. So I'm going to flip over to a Excel table here that looks pretty complicated. I'm going to turn it over to Zachary to kind of to walk us through it. But before I do, just just point out the legend up here. In blue, this is the water levels, right? So we've looked at this now in a couple different ways. This is the same data essentially that we were looking at a little bit ago from the website. And then the calculated values. So red is the 5th percentile. I guess that's sort of a yellowish color here is the 15th. So these would be kind of the trigger values for voluntary and then mandatory restrictions. So Zach, you want to elaborate on that, either how it was calculated or anything to kind of explain that better or answer any questions that the commission has?
Yeah, sure thing. I'll give you a quick overview, and I'm just going to ask for your help a little bit like we did before. So on the left side of the current tab that you guys are looking at, that is basically all the data that we've collected from this well since we started monitoring that one. That one would have been July 2002. And we'll come back to this sheet, John. If you go to the next sheet, basically what I did is I sorted this out by month and then just broke them down into what their percentiles are. So the 15th lower percentile, the 5th lower percentile, we threw the 10th percentile in there just to see what it would look like. And the reason we do each month is rather than having, say, one level that you guys trip out, I'll give you a great example, and that goes back to the 2001 and 2002 drought. So 2001 was a pretty dry fall going into the winter. And let's just say we had, well, unfortunately, it's not going to be on the Watkins Park one. But just to give you an example, actually, no, I do have a great example. John, I hate to make you go there. Do you still have the Carroll County Observation Network up?
Yeah, I'll open it up.
Sure.
Flip back to it.
So if you head on up towards Hampstead in the northeast portion of the county, there's one well in particular Tom and I really like that has like this really nice, it's a little bit delayed, but
okay.
It's not a very noisy graph. Go ahead and click, of all the ones that are on the right-hand side, the second one up from the bottom. Yeah, you got it. That's the one. It should be production well 14.
Yep.
Beautiful. Okay.
Wow.
And if you move just a little bit to the left, you can see 2001 and 2002 there. And this is kind of why we have that example. So let's just pick on, say, 795 feet. It's a level that's normally pretty low, but if you had that as your one-time threshold, maybe you get real close to it like you did at 2001, but you didn't trip there. You'd expect to have come back up. But if you don't have that recharge, or maybe you did get some recharge and you didn't quite have as much as you normally would, you're starting the next summer in a weaker state. You already have less water in storage. So the idea behind the percentiles here, maybe we go into a dry fall and winter, we're kind of in voluntary restriction phase, maybe you're in a better position to start the next winter staying, or the next summer staying in that phase, than if it had just been abated and you do a set trigger again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So if you minimize that and go back to the Excel spreadsheet, taking all of those numbers, we're just taking the numbers right there across the top because we've just sorted those numbers by month, turn them into percentiles. If you go back to that first sheet, this is that same graph now with that repeating annual pattern. So you're seeing each monthly percentile repeating throughout the year versus the actual water levels. And what you'll find is those more severe droughts, the 2002, the 2007 droughts are the ones that ultimately trigger your mandatory restrictions for the time being. And the voluntary phase is just a little bit higher up than that. It'll obviously happen first. But it's not going to be something that trips all the time. It's just when you start to get down into a potentially concerning level. And the way the state tends to look at this is they'll call something unusually low or below normal once it gets below the 25th percentile. That's when they start to put things into a watch category. And it's around the time that you get to, I believe, the 10th percentile where they start putting out some serious drought warnings for you guys. So you're hitting those triggers kind of using localized data, but still the same thresholds that kind of complement the regional and statewide approaches.
So how do we get this information on a routine basis to monitor that? Because I've never seen this graph before.
No, so this is one I custom made for you guys, and I'm going to try to find a way to automate it so that it doesn't have to manually be sorted again. But I'll gladly keep sending the data in real time to the commission as I collect it. And Dick, just like always, you guys know what we do as part of the WRCC. Once we hit even the 25th percentile, we kind of give you guys the notification. So I've got no problem continuing that and telling you once we hit those 15 and 5% thresholds as well.
And you do that on a regional basis throughout Carroll County, because like we're looking at before, if you go to the northern part of the county, they're more of a drought situation, and down area here we're pretty normal. So you kind of have to tweak it depending on what part of the county you're talking about.
Right. So I didn't bring one today. What I usually do is I take basically the same approach that you're looking at, and I have some Excel spreadsheets myself, where once a month I do go ahead and look at them in the context of those percentiles for that month. So I'll take all the Novembers of record and I'll run through all the wells that we have in our network and see how each municipality is generally faring.
Okay.
So like the last couple updates would say things like, Freedom District, Mount Airy, they're normal. Westminster's a little bit below, Tawny Town's below, things like that. So there'll be a monthly snapshot for everybody.
And that's the snapshot you give out at the WRCC?
Yep, you got it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Dick, I think this is helpful because this is specific to Mount Airy, right? We're only looking at basically Mount Airy wells here. So maybe we're fine this part of the county. So, we're not getting lost in sort of the noise from, other counties or other portions of the county that may be in a worse situation. So I think that's the benefit here of having local wells and kind of local focus, I guess, for our own decision-making purpose.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we need to figure out is how to sort of capture this in a fairly easy way, because this is complicated, right? Nobody wants to look at pages of 10,000 numbers. My thought is we can take the percentiles, which do change over time. These are based on a 20-year record, so that they don't change overnight. But either way, these are values that we can pull into a table. So I'm envisioning our guidance document has one table, maybe two, that capture these values, the 15 and 5% value for each month. And then, how do we use that? Well, let's say we're at the December meeting here for the Water and Sewer Commission. We know what the 15th percentile value is, 719, right? Well, we can fairly easily, just in a couple moments, go back to this table, that's Hampstead, go back to this one that we got to by clicking on that map in 3 steps, and we could see where we are. here's, this is what, right at about 720. So, a bit of a dip, but not really an issue. But maybe we say, hey, let's keep an eye on it, kind of thing. But I think that's how we can use it, Dick, is that we have this data at our fingertips. And of course, we have Carroll County who can email the information. They're looking at this more so than we will be, for sure. But it gives us the ability and the awareness to look at it as well. So, so again, I think that's another benefit of the approach here. Okay. And just I'm going to highlight it again. We're not going to make any recommendations without talking to the water department. I mean, even if we're down low, maybe there isn't a need for recommendations. Maybe water department will feel that things are in pretty good shape, and they're looking at it on even a more frequent basis. We know those folks because we met with them, Dick. They're visiting the pumping supply wells on a regular basis and collecting measurements, and they have high confidence in the flows from those wells. All right, so moving along, let's see. I highlighted this as a point of discussion. So we had some text in here about what does it mean for voluntary actions. I want to highlight two things here. One is added in these hours. So Hampstead has, interestingly, they have water use restrictions year round. So they actually, I guess prohibit would be the right word, prohibit the use of outdoor water between the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. year round, regardless of precipitation or potential, drought circumstances. They feel that those, because of other factors, evapotranspiration and whatnot, that's sort of the riskiest times to use water, or to ensure you're wasting the most water. So that's that's interesting. I think that's a pretty interesting approach for a municipality to take, and probably really benefits the town. But from our perspective, for our voluntary restriction, one thought here is, rather than just flat out recommending no use of outdoor water, that's one option. That's how it was worded. I've added in the time frame as well. So it's voluntary. We would ask people not to use it between 9 and 6 p.m., which my mind would be easier for folks to stomach, so to speak, right? Because they can still use it, but we're communicating to them the need to conserve water, but we're not going so far to just say flat out. So something to consider. I don't know if any of you guys have any thoughts on that. Does that seem reasonable? Does it seem like it's making it too complicated?
I think it's very,
Yeah, okay.
see too many people watering in hot parts of the day that's just wasting it. So
Right.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I think Hampstead has a pretty good approach. I don't know if, I think we probably all use water in the middle of the day at times, right? Usually when you wash your car, but yeah. So either way, so that's how it's worded right now. You can look at it. If you have comments, mark it up, and we can discuss a little bit further if you wrap this thing up. Okay, and let's see, pressure washing. Oh, this was an interesting thing that was brought up. So sometimes homeowner associations have HOA requirements for pressure washing your house, to take care of mildew or algae that might be growing on it. So just something to think about. Are you guys aware of any of those kinds of requirements in any of our HOAs in town?
I've never heard of it in town.
Yeah, it's possible that some of the neighborhoods around town do, but just something to think about. I don't know if there was a neighborhood that had that requirement. Presumably, we would expect them to put that on hold, right? We wouldn't want people to be pressure washing their house just because the HOA required it. So again, something Carroll County pointed out over here. Zach, anything else to add to that?
No, generally, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the 9 to 6. Like you said, in Hampstead, that's a year round. It's up to you guys if you want to do that as voluntary, or if you'd seek to do something like that more permanently. I'll defer to you guys and your council. But yeah, the pressure washing, I mean, that's something that here in Hampstead, it's one of the things my HOA require. Well, I'm not going to say requires. They'll say you need to address, the mold and mildew on the side of your house.
Right.
A lot of people do turn to pressure washing, but there are alternatives. If we're in a voluntary phase, the thought was the commission could reach out to the homeowners associations, see if they'd be willing to do things a little bit different, maybe suspend pressure washing. And they do have like biodegradable spray-on products you can use that achieve the same thing but don't actually use water. So.
Okay. So yeah, if nothing else, I think it's something for us to be aware of. We could potentially ask around and learn a little bit more about whether or not that's a potential issue down the road. I think it's fairly minor, but okay. So moving into the red mandatory restrictions. So these are basically the same factors that we just went through, the same criteria. They're just slightly, they're taking it to the next level. So for instance, for this one, this is the MDE monitoring system for rainfall and also for their overall status. Once they move into the emergency category, that's a red flag, right? That's us, realizing that there's a likely issue on hand here. This is that figure that I like to keep bringing up. This one, this is greater than 75%. As this starts to turn dark red, yet another indicator that action might be warranted or justified. And then down here, this is the Carroll County Well Network. So this would be the 5th percentile that we were just looking at the map. So as we start to get down to these values, then it's more justification for potential recommendation to town council for mandatory water restrictions. And then as always, input from the water department. Okay, so let's see here. So we talked about the car washes. We talked about the fact that this needs to be all water use, including businesses. So we'll make sure that's clear through these paragraphs. I think that captures most of those changes there. This is an interesting point here. This inventorying our water usage. This is, I think, separate from what we're trying to achieve at the moment, but Dick, it might be something interesting for the Water Commission, Sewer and Water Commission to consider is just understanding as well as we can how water is used within the town. The mix between commercial, residential, industrial, and other things we could glean from the records that we have and the information that's available to us.
Well, if you could help me define what it is you need, basically the billing system, I think, really just records the difference between residential and commercial. It doesn't distinguish between retail or industrial areas. So that would take some effort you'd have to do it by addresses. But from a very general residential versus commercial, that's all segregated.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Zachary, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? What could be gained, if the commission wanted to embark on that effort? Sort of what could we gain from that?
Sure. A lot of it is going to kind of tackle what approaches you guys are looking at as far as water goes. So it's kind of a twofold thing here. Part of it is how effective your drought plan is going to be, especially on the voluntary measures, or even in the actual restriction phase with what you're trying to tackle. I mean, if you're predominantly residential water usage and you have strategies that are going to go after residential, you're going to gain a lot there. One of the tools I talked about with you, John, earlier was kind of what our planning department had out as existing versus planned potential demands. And if that table's right, it looks like you guys are mostly residential use right now. And I'm sure that's something that everyone in the office can probably confirm or can confirm. But if the numbers for what's planned down the road are true, you'll start to look more at other demand, things that might be commercial, industrial, institutional, things like that. And there's different strategies that would have to go into effect to tackle some of the other water uses like that. And some of it could just be, general awareness things about like low flow devices. It really depends on exactly what it is that's going to be in place. And that's why I think it's kind of worth, number one, trying to see what your breakout is for your water usage, understanding who your biggest water users are, and seeing how that's going to come to change through time.
Okay, I think that would be a potential initiative, right, Dick? If if we want to dig into that at a later date, something for us to think about.
That's doable, to figure out who the big water users and everything, both residential, commercial. Yeah, we can do that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's information. It would provide some benefit, depending on the level of effort that would go into it. We might want to decide to do that. All right. So let's see here. I think this is all fairly straightforward. Zach, anything you want to add about this comment here? As you point out, this sort of ties to the EPA risk and resiliency assessment requirement, which I think has been in the news lately.
Right. For that part, as far as restrictions go, I would just check in. I believe you said it's Brian who runs your treatment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just check in with him because a lot of those things that came up, they should already have contingency plans for either that they've had existing or at least associated with the EPA risk and resiliency assessment that's ongoing right now. Because I know that effort should be
Right.
largely wrapping up in the next few months.
Right. So here we're just referencing those types of things that could happen, just as a reminder that those are circumstances where the town could take action, could implement restrictions. But yeah, you're right. So as far as the protocols in place, yeah, that'll be defined elsewhere. Right. And then as far as enforcement and sort of who has a responsibility for this, Dick, could you reiterate sort of what our thought is on that? I mean, I know we have the police department now. So we mentioned that in here, like right here, the Mount Airy Police Department code enforcer shall enforce the ban. I think that's it, right? I don't know if there's anything else we need to elaborate on from that perspective. That would include fines, I believe, or potentially could include fines.
Yes, it does. We have the police department code enforcement, other authorized town officials, and the reason that's in the general statement, by the way, Larry, I believe that you're one of those officials who has the authority or power to issue citations for violations of the code. So, and I'm not sure with the town administrator, but the reason it's left like that is to make sure that all bases are covered, and you have to go to the code to determine the exact people. And I don't think we want to have our memorandum here specify the people, because if the code changes, we know we're going to forget to change this. So you want to have that general provision in there, but there's no question the police department code enforcers are the main people.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so I think that that covers it. I feel like with oh yeah, please, yeah, go ahead.
Under the emergency section, it talks about alternate sources of water. What could some of those alternate sources of water be?
Let's see, looking for that language. Right here. So yeah, I mean, presumably it would be trucking water in, right? That would be one option. Is bring in water trucks. I know that happens in places. Bring in bottled water.
That's basically it, because one of the things, Zach, is having an agreement with nearby municipalities that could provide water to you. Well, that doesn't happen in Mount Airy. There's nobody that can do that. There's not the infrastructure to do that. So I think John's right. It's really bringing in the state coming in with those water tankers, or it would be bottled water, that type of thing. But working through the county and the state, that's about it.
All right, so there would be no supplement to the municipal supply.
No, we don't have the ability to do that. No.
The only thing I could offer that the town could look into doing long-term would be kind of what we call redundant source capacity. So you guys are looking to have additional wells in place to call upon in such circumstances. And that could be I mean, that could even tie into some of the other things you have above. If you lose a well of contamination, if there's an equipment failure in one of them, or if you're just finding that the wells can't quite keep up with demand, you have additional ones on standby. So one of those things the town could consider long-term, and this is a discussion to have with DPW, would be to go drill additional wells and hook them into the system. In your case, it would require a different operator's license, different treatment. But I mean, there is always the potentiality of calling upon a surface water source. I want to say South Branch of Patapsco is right there. I can't say anything's going to happen with it anytime soon. I know there were discussions before about reservoirs long-term, but I don't know what kind of traction or time frame anything like that is on.
I could tell from the history of this town that they are resistant to go to any surface water source at all. So we would face that problem, but that's a political issue. In terms of ability to pump water, we have 11 wells, 1, 2 or so go down. Those wells are capable, and our assessment is that the water supply is there to provide probably at least 50% more water easily, and maybe 100% more water than what we're permitted. Our biggest fact that not the ability or what we believe to be the water capacity in these wells, as evidenced, for example, by the Watkins well, is the state of Maryland MDE permit and violation of the permit. That got us in trouble back in the early 2000s. Never was an issue of whether we had the ability to pump the water or there would be any negative effect on the water table or wells outside municipal around the town. It always has been a factor of we manage to the permit.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing I'll say, I mean, that's a very good point, Dick, and it's quite true. Although for a drought circumstance, ultimately, you'd want to try and keep the demand the same that it would be year round. So, I mean, that's part of why you have the restrictions in place, is you don't want everyone to go out there and waste water watering the lawn in the middle of the day under, that 5th percentile. But if your wells actually have the capacity, you shouldn't have that need then in a drought. If your demand were to stay the same, to call upon trucked in water or anything like that, the well should be capable of meeting it.
Yeah, you're right. My expectation is that, emergency situation that would affect all 11 wells spread out through is really, really, really remote. We might see a well or two, here or there that has a particular problem. And there have been some problems in the past where a well is shut down for a while, it's blown out and, wait until situation when it can be brought back online. And Mark, you can comment on this too. We've always done very well with being able to maintain our ability to provide the water that's necessary for the residents and businesses. Okay. Any comments?
I think you hit it nail on the head. The water, we have had problems over the years when I was working there, that we would shut one well off, but we would increase it in a different area. So the town does have the capacity to, use all wells to still meet the demand.
Yeah, that's what I got out of that meeting with the water department as well, Dick, was that, there's a lot of flexibility there, and it's not like we're operating at max capacity in any way. So certainly some flexibility if there was a well to go down, I imagine we have various options to accommodate that.
Yeah.
I also expect that some of that might be covered in that emergency plan that I guess is to be drafted, if it doesn't exist already. I don't know.
I would suggest that we don't want to put something like that in there. I mean, that's just a standard operating procedure. And before you get to the point where, you're going to go in there and put water restrictions and all of that, that'd just be one consideration that would be done to say, okay, we're going to shut down well 5 and, pump some more out of well 11 or something like that. And that's done on a routine basis.
Yeah.
That I don't think we want to put that in there.
Yeah, that's behind the scenes stuff that the water department takes care of on a daily basis as needed.
Right.
And they know that system well and can manage it behind the scenes, thankfully. Okay, well, so other questions you guys have?
I have two things. We talk about DLRM, which is Department of Land and Resource Management, Carroll County. I don't know if we define who they are and say who they are. Somebody, and we do have a section that has one definition, and you might want to just say, you know,
Yeah.
DLRM is whatever. The other one is, I think when you
Somewhere, but yeah.
get past the immediate group here and our discussion, when you start talking about these percentiles, I think we're going to confuse the daylights out of people who are unfamiliar with all of this. Maybe there should be, and this could be in definitions too, a small paragraph, if you can, that says this is what these percentiles mean or something, so that, you know, people that come after us actually know what we're talking about. So
Right.
I think a little clarification there would probably help other people.
Yeah, it's a good point.
That's my,
For sure.
I agree with
Other than
that.
that-
The
other than that,
percentile,
great
I'm not
job.
sure if it's percentile of supply or percentile of use.
I'm sorry, I missed that question. Would you mind repeating?
Oh, I'm sorry. It just, when I first looked at those numbers, I was unsure whether it was percentile of supply or percentile of use or demand.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think that defining it more clearly would be helpful. So it would be, it's basically a percentile of the water levels, you know, in those wells. So, you know, we're collecting, it's basically, well, it's essentially a depth to water measurement that Zachary collects every biweekly, so twice a month. And so he measures depth to water, and then based on the surface elevation at that well casing, can calculate the water level, which I assume is above mean sea level. And then and that varies over time, right? It goes up and down. And so the fifth percentile, or those percentile calcs, are based on that historical record of water levels. But yeah, we can come up with an actual clear definition, an explanation to help ourselves and anyone who uses this in the future better understand all of that as well. Great, good questions. What else do we have? Any other thoughts? If not, okay. So
I say, does everybody feel that if John kind of, as he called it, cleaned up all of this and probably added the maybe two definitions and went ahead and put this together, that we're pretty much done? Or does anybody see anything in the horizon? Because what I'm getting at is, if John has a final memo to put out in January, you know, we can then take this from there and give it immediately to the mayor and the town council, so that they could take a look at it and get the process going and hopefully pass a resolution that would make this an official policy. So if you have anything, you know, let John know, and you know, let's aim for January as our day.
Okay.
So in January, you'll have a clean copy, and I can put this on the agenda for February. Talk to the staff, see if there's anything, you know, I could put it on as new business, or we could just go ahead and do the resolution for February. So.
I would just, yes, our objective would be you get it after the January meeting, it's circulated, everybody has time, put it on the February, and how you want to handle that, you know, at the February meeting is up to you.
Okay, all right. Nice work, John.
Yeah, excellent work.
certainly, yep. And a lot of thanks to Zachary for helping us out as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Zach.
Hey, John, this is Tony Burke. Are you going to be able to send that newest version, draft version out to everybody by tomorrow, you think?
Yeah, I will try. Is
Okay.
that for publication
Yeah,
deadline or something?
I need to pull some information out of them on deadline. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we need to define the percentiles. So what I won't be able to do by tomorrow, I don't think, is pull together the tables that I mentioned to kind of,
That's okay.
so
That's
it'll
okay.
still be a draft version. So yeah, but I
Yep.
can certainly
That's okay.
clean it up a little bit, remove comments that we've addressed, and circulate that as long as the commission's okay, right? And everybody wants to see it, or I'm sure is looking forward to reading it again. So,
I
yes, I'll
trust
do
you.
that.
I need something to read at breakfast too, you know, so.
Right, yeah, definitely. So yeah, so I'll try to clean it up and circulate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
What was that, Dick?
I was gonna say, Larry, think about, we give you a clean copy and say after the January meeting, you want to pass it on to Tom for his review?
Yeah. What I'll do is make sure that Tom and David and Pat see it. And, you know, and make sure that we have the proper process for, you know, be it a referendum, be it, you know, if it comes up in new business, if it comes up, you know, as something that we just want to vote on in February, or if it's something we want to talk about for at February's meeting so that the public is aware of it and then vote on it in March, you know, maybe.
My understanding back 27, actually, first one was the mayor actually, I believe, has the authority to do this on his own, but as a courtesy, also, like you say, so the public is aware of exactly what we're doing, is to run it by the town council, and they would pass a resolution approving whatever the mayor's recommendation is. So we kind of, that's the process that I believe that is supposed to happen. So, you know, you and the mayor could set that up in whatever fashion you want to.
Okay, all right, well, get her done.
All right, great job. Thanks a lot, Zach, and great job, John. I think we're getting there.
Yeah, getting close.
Yeah, I only have one more item on the agenda, and that's that I sent out a schedule that shows the amount of capital expenses for water and sewer that is in the current budget. And the reason for doing that is I just want to let you know what it is so that you're aware of it. And my intention is, because we had that resolution that was passed about the amount of reserves we should have, and by the way, this isn't going to put us in that jeopardy, but to just set up where we kind of track along what's happening as we're coming to the new budget cycle for the capital water and sewer. And by the way, when you look at that number, when you take a look at that big number for the water system, by the way, that's about 550,000. That's for the refurbishment of our water tower 2 across the street from the elementary school, and 720,000, which is for the water line down Center Street. So we can go from, I believe, a 6-inch line to a 12-inch line to connect all that up so that you know, we can balance the 3 water towers. The 600,000 or so is basically 400,000. That's the biggest element. That's going for expansion of the sludge building over there at the wastewater treatment plant. That's the big bucks. The water tower is actually, I don't know if it's complete or not now, but close to it. The question is whether 720 is going to be spent on the water main on Center Street or deferred to next year. But the idea there was to do that in conjunction with putting Center Street through to Route 27. But so that's just for background. I'm going to get the current capital reserve balances for everybody so we know next month and we can compare and see where we're at, assuming these expenses and whatever else is going to come in to the 2021 budget. So, no, it should be 2022 budget for the capital expenditures. I have not concentrated so much on the operating because the operating side of the house is doing well. We're usually in a slight, you know, income over expense And this year, we're budgeted to do that again. So there should be some, as this shows, if you go up to the top, you'll see there should be some money coming in from surplus from the budget. And that's will balance the budget capital side of the house. So as long as that continues with the operating side, you know, at a break even or, you know, slightly ahead of the game, we should be good. The capital side is the one that's going to make the difference in terms of how we look at rates and how we look at our reserves situation. No panic now. It's just something we need to set up. So that's just on there to say that's something that we're going to be doing during the budget cycle. Anything else anybody have?
I don't have anything.
I don't either.
All right, we're good. I go thank everybody for their participation. You know, good meeting. So I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Dave there. Somebody want to second it?
Yeah, John did.
Oh, John did? All right. We're all in favor of that, I assume, right? All right.
All right.
All right, appreciate Zach, thanks a lot for taking the time with us. We
Yeah,
really
thanks, Zach.
appreciate it.
Time, more than happy to help. I'm there as a resource if you guys ever need me.
Like,
All right, before we go, I just want to wish all you all a Merry Christmas.
All right.
You as well.
Yeah.
Same to you.
Christmas, happy holidays to everybody and enjoy. No WRCC meeting this month, right, Zach?
Do not believe so, no.
Okay. All right, we'll see you all next month and enjoy the holiday.
Have a good
All
one.
right.
Bye-bye.
See y'all.